biodiversity crisis that we are all facing. We have an excellent panel of speakers. One by one, they will start trickling in. But maybe we could already start our session. We don't want to run out of time eventually with our discussion, but also for the benefit of our participants on Zoom. So maybe I could request people to start occupying the front row so that those who would come in at a much later time can just get comfortable at the back. And we don't want our speakers to be talking to empty chairs, right? It's not cool. So may I request, folks? Yeah, I don't want to put you on the spot, but yes, you're on the spot. Come on up. Yes, thank you so much. All right, so, okay, we have very good microphones here. And I think we're ready to roll. Yeah? Yes. So welcome everyone to this session on the planetary crisis, climate change, biodiversity loss, and chemical and waste pollution. We could have been more creative on the title, but we didn't want to miss out on anything. So all of those crises, but for sure, we'll try to cover as much as we could, but also not leaving this room feeling overwhelmed and depressed with so many crises staring in front of us. What we hope to come out with is, a renewed sense of order for our speakers, a renewed sense of hope and, determination that we will overcome. So I'd like to hand it over now to Daniela, one of our co-organizers. So this session is being co-organized, by the way, by Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, the Millennials Movement, Latin Dad, the Indigenous Peoples Major Group, and Reaccion Climatica. All right, Daniela, over to you. Okay, thank you, Tete. Yes, I really wanted to thank you all for being here despite all the challenges we face today. Thank you for joining us at the second day of the Global People's Assembly. I am Daniela. I am representing the Millennials Movement, a Latin American-based organization for youth, focused on promoting youth in spaces and events like the one happening today. So, well, regarding the context of our meeting today, I will be reading because I need to deliver my organization's message very well. Our session on climate justice is a topic that should be at the center of every conversation happening today at that building right in front of us at the United Nations General Assembly. It's really unfortunate that 7 years from the goals, the 2030 agenda, we have only achieved 15% of the goals. It is undeniable that to move forward, it is necessary to think about a sustainable future, and to do so, we cannot remove from the center of the conversation the importance of the triple environmental crisis and environmental justice, especially the protection of our environmental defenders, who around the world give their lives to protect our planet. I come from one of the most dangerous regions to be an environmental defender in the world, Latin America, where those of us who advocate for environmental justice know ourselves to be vulnerable and at constant risk despite having an instrument such as the Escazú Agreement, the first regional environmental agreement and the first in the world that focuses on the protection of human rights of environmental defenders. I know we will talk further about this topic, but I think it's one of the main ones to take over on in the meeting. If we want to act, there really is some political will in the first instance. If we want to act and there is some political will in the first instance, we must guarantee unrestricted protection in all regions of the defenders of our planet. Added to this is the triple climate crisis that we experience today. And despite seeing marches like the one that happened yesterday, people in the streets demanding action, hundreds of events around the world, we still don't have a concrete response to the climate crisis. That is why this session is urgent. We sense those thousands of gatherings happening around the world to be able to raise and share our voices in the search to elevate our proposals to those who define our future, that of the planet. Likewise, today we will address some of the most relevant and urgent issues to ensure this transition, in which the development of the global north has to meet the development of the global south. We cannot continue advancing if this means that the development for some regions means exploitation. The exploitation of strategic minerals in other countries of the global south, leading social and environmental liabilities in local communities. What we need is a sustainable and fair transition, which goes beyond technologies that still rely on the extraction of minerals and fossil fuel sectors. Our organization would like to, Millennials Movement, really wants to express our concern about the risk of neocolonialism, of energetic neocolonialism. And we believe the leaders have to act on that. That is why in this panel we have invited representatives of civil society from diverse parts of the world, with experiences and demands that converge with cultures despite coming from such different spaces. Well, we really hope that you will find these voices inspiring as well. We want to keep hope up. We understand that this is an urgent matter, but well, please be aware that we will share our experiences. We will open the space eventually on a session. Our session is interactive, and well, I'm sorry, I got really nervous. I don't know. Thank you so much for listening to me and thank you so much, Daniela. No need to be nervous because this is a crowd that shares the same concerns, shares the same commitment, and we're here to learn each other. That in. But we'd also like to hear from everyone. Sure, everyone is come to this stage, bringing their own experiences of the acts, of the challenges, as well as said in the official stage. At the UN, we're not there. We have and coming here. It's not a very welcoming space. Moving on, I'd like to invite, he's one of the rock stars of the climate justice movement. So, yeah, so if you haven't had the privilege of hearing him speak, I'm building you up so much, no? Pressure, yeah. But we won't be disappointed because the Reverend Nnimmo Bassey, who is the director of the Health of Mother Earth Foundation in Nigeria, is a very strong and powerful voice, not just at the country level, but also at global level. So Nnimmo, we'd like to invite you now to hear your important messages and powerful messages. Over to you, Nnimmo.
Thank you so much, Tete. And good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you. I want to make sure that you are all listening to me. And the 11th commandment is that you must understand my accent. It is a great pleasure to be a part of this conversation, and I like the fact that it's more or less informal, so we can speak to ourselves. Now, when we speak of the climate crisis, we have to, first of all, understand the origin of the problem. That helps us to understand what needs to be done. And the climate crisis is an outcome of an exploitative and expansionist socioeconomic system that is based on extractivism. And because the basis is expansionist, you would agree with me that yesterday you were on the march, you would see that most of the groups had signs saying we have to move away from fossil fuels. Now, because the system keeps on fossil fuels, and we've been locked into this petroleum civilization, which will astonish Victorians in the future, we're seeing the system struggling to accept this fact. So that even the politicians who say that it's time to shift to renewable energy are not really able to put it into practice because they are under pressure by the system to maintain the status quo. So today we're looking at the crisis. It's all around us, big weather events, storms. Look at what happened in Libya. Over so many thousands of people washed away by the flood because of the hazardous in the case of Libya, Libya was a fairly stable nation until some countries decided to invade to destroy it. And I'm sure you understand. I mean,
No sound from your side.
into the ground. What does this mean? That people are born in pollution, they live in pollution, they die in pollution, they are buried in pollution. It's something that should not be acceptable by anybody. Now, just in May this year, one of the state governments in the Niger Delta region issued a report from the Commission on Environment and Oil and Environment. And they showed that that state was polluted at a per capita level of 1.5 barrels of oil per capita. So everybody in the state can have his wash soaked in 1.5 barrels of crude oil. And all the water bodies, most of the water bodies contaminated. Hydrocarbon pollution has gone up to 1 million times. 1 million times above safe living. But people are living there. And this sacrifice zone, the Ecosocial Pact Manifesto for the Global South, which is a document I recommend that you find online, recommend that there has to be a halt in the expansion of sacrifice zones in the Global South, and especially in the already sacrificed territory. Just imagine you're living in a place where there's a per capita pollution of 1.5 barrels. One drop of crude oil contaminates 25 liters of water. One drop makes 25 liters no longer possible. So when you pump millions of barrels into aquatic ecosystems, you are destroying the biodiversity, you are killing the people, and no wonder life expectancy is as low as 41 years in this area. In fact, back at home, activists know me as a living ancestor because I've exceeded that age limit, but not many have done that. You go to some places, the young people are the elders. This is very anachronistic. So keeping away from fossil fuels is a critical measure for tackling global warming. And this is what we've learned from the Yasuni case in Ecuador, where there was a vote on 20th August. 66% of the voters voted yes to keep the fossil fuels in the ground. Now, that to me is real climate action, not the false solution of saying we're going to capture and store carbon or carbon dioxide removal mechanism or geoengineering to whiten the clouds or put mirrors in the sky to reflect radiation or to fertilize the oceans to absorb more carbon or to make trees more efficient in terms of chlorophyll so that they take more carbon in, all the crazy ideas, which I believe is mostly, that is what Article 6 or the Paris Agreement panders to, technologies to solve the problem of fake carbon mechanism, carbon market mechanism. And, it's really ridiculous, the kind of things we hear, even at the just concluded African Climate Summit, when we expected to get some strong demand. We were seeing more nations in Africa ready to sell off forests as carbon sinks to get some carbon credit. And so you sell off your life and you have some money in your hand and it doesn't mean anything. So I'm going to round up. I see you are getting a bit nervous. Whether I'll go on for 1 hour. No. Okay, I'm rounding up. So I believe that one, we have to tackle our imaginaries, the language we speak when it comes to climate change. People talk about to decarbonize the economy. I think we should talk about to spiritualize the economy, to move away from petroleum civilization, not just to keep on polluting and then believing that we can offset that pollution by paying for a forest somewhere and excluding community people from enjoying what nature has so generously given them. The final point is that it's good we're transitioning to green energy, but where this critical transition element minerals come from must also be of concern. We don't want to see this as trash. for cobalt, for lithium, for the rest. And so, well, we need green energy. So you kill everybody and kill biodiversity. That is very unacceptable. And so the same arguments are for the top fossil fuels. We need to have a just transition where the people have a voice are also on the table. Otherwise, we're going to create more problems, transiting from one problem to another, and the people suffering. Then finally, finance. People applauded for loss and damage when it was announced in El Samsek. I didn't applaud it because I know that if the world would not meet the 10 billion target set in 2009 at Copenhagen, and they couldn't meet the 100 billion that was supposed to kick in for 2020, and they just pushed the can down the road, loss and damage would be very problematic. And we're going to see that in Dubai in November, December. In fact, the American envoy, Planetary, already said that they would not treat loss and damage as reparation. But what we need is climate reparation, payment of the climate debt, because the harm that we are suffering was not created by those who are most vulnerable. This has to be recognized. It's not charity. If it's charity, there'll be no hope. But we're hopeful that we'll all stand together in solidarity and demand for justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much for laying it very clear for all of us how we would analyze the roots and not just the symptoms or manifestations of the climate crisis. Because often we hear climate porn, it's about the body bags, it's about the victims, but not about the political economy, not about the geopolitics of all of these things. Because at the end of the day, it's about this economic system extracting the most from Mother Earth without any regard for what its impact would be on people and planet. So thank you very much, Nnimmo, for setting the stage for our conversations this morning. So let me now move on to another fierce feminist beside me who will speak about the impact on people of the climate crisis. So over to you, Carmen Capriles from Reaccion Climatica from Bolivia. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for being late. Traffic is a mess. I hope the Zoom can hear me well. I'm going to give an overview of the planetary crisis that we're facing, and I'm sorry I'm going to be oversimplifying some of the issues because of time. We can talk about it afterwards, but we have identified basically three planetary crises that are affecting us. One is climate change, the other one is nature loss, and the other one is chemicals and waste. So let me start with climate change. We all know what's happening, what the problem is, but sometimes we are not keen on, we've been really bad at making people understand how it really works. And if we don't really understand how this mechanism is being triggered, it's really hard to find real solutions. So when we talk about global warming and climate change, mostly we use them as synonyms, but there are two different things. Global warming is that the atmosphere is heating up due to greenhouse gases, which generates that the temperature starts rising. And the mechanism that the planet has to lower that, to get rid of that excess of heat or energy is the climate. Wherever you are, you have a climate that will stabilize the atmosphere in that specific place. Because if not, then you're going to start having problems basically with water. It's amazing how this is related to water. And we have broken the water cycle when we are heating up the atmosphere. So that's why we have stronger storms or places where there are droughts and so on, because this water cycle has been broken basically. And that's why it's important to lower the emissions. The problem is not emissions. problem with the Paris Agreement is that we cannot just put a thermostat and say 2 degrees. So we need to analyze deeper where these greenhouse gases are coming and how to lower them. So that's one of the problems. The other one is nature laws. But how do we know that nature law that we're having a nature laws problem? Raise your hand if your country has international debt. Let's see. Which of your countries does not have an international debt? If it does have, raise your hand. Doesn't have? Basically, the only country that doesn't have an international debt, as far as I know, is Liechtenstein. Well, it has the bank. So if we analyze the debt, and the countries that have more international debt are US and are China. So where is the money? Because there has to be somebody that gets money and the other one that takes. But well, we like to invent also money just printed and just solve economical problems. But that is, for me, a paradox on how we are losing the resources because we're spending money. Like to do weapons or to do cars or to do whatever, we need resources. So that's how much resources we're using and we're borrowing for future generations or whatever you want to do it. And I'm sorry, I'm not an economist. So if there is an economist, we can talk about it later. The other problem, which is really affecting us, is chemical pollution. In the last 50 years, well, plastics were like really introduced massively around the decade of the 50s, but it became like mass production around the 80s. So we're talking about like the last 50 years that we've been polluting ourselves. Not only plastics, we have pesticides, we have all the chemicals that we use to clean it. So it is important to understand that many of these chemicals, it has been demonstrated that they are hormonal disruptors. And what does that mean? Like we have the steroids that will regulate our body mass, for example. When it affects your thyroid, which is the gland that secretes hormones, then you're going to start like getting too much weight or too less weight. In the case of, there are specific chemicals like D2A, which is bisphenol A. This is very similar to estrogen. You know, women, we need estrogen, and we have this that stimulates estrogen in our body. So it's also a problem, and especially when you are like pregnant and you are exposed to this kind of chemicals, because, okay, you may have like gender-wise effects. I'm oversimplified, it's much more complex, but then you have bisphenol A in your body. So this bisphenol is going to tell your body that you have enough estrogen. So your baby, although it's going to be an excess, it's not going to have enough estrogen, and that is going to have repercussions further on when the baby develops into a human being. It's worse in the case of males because we have pellets. Pellets stimulate not steroids, testosterone. And if a woman is pregnant and it has enough pellets, it will generate testosterone. So you may have an XY, and pellets are going to say you have done enough testosterone, and that may lead to the development of genitals. So if there are improper genitals, then you cannot solve. You're going to have problems in the development of the human being. So those are some of the important issues that we have to take in mind. And just to wrap up, sorry for oversimplifying things, is that we need policy, not action. Why policy and not action? What is the difference? Like electric cars. We have 3,000 patents until today of electric cars, but every car is different. So although we're doing action, we're doing this transition to electric cars, but every car has a specific charge. What does it mean to have policy? That, okay, we're going to have electric cars. We're going to have one kind of charger. So we don't have to make this disposal of electric cars that we're going to use. And so that's why we need policy and not only action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carmen. I know we're learning a lot from things that you've said, no? And I'm sure
our friends here would also want to contribute or ask you some clarifications. We could have time for that later. So now I'm moving on to our next speaker, who is from the Philippines, just like me. She is from the Indigenous Peoples Major Group, and her organization is SEBSEBA. So give it up for Grace Balawan. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Nnimmo and Carmen, for kicking off the issues that we are facing. I fully agree that we are facing systemic concern here in relation to this planetary crisis that we are facing. And just to reiterate some points that we have already heard, I have concrete examples on how this has been impacting on indigenous people and their land resources and territories. For example, with the transition for gas transition, they call it. We know that the extraction of these elements and minerals are done in indigenous people's territories. And we have examples which we have already been documenting, ongoing the documentation in Peru as well as in other parts. And of course, just to elaborate more on what Nnimmo had been emphasizing, indigenous peoples are one of the most vulnerable populations in relation to the climate change impact. But at the same time, we always claim that we are protecting the remaining 80% of biodiversity within our territory. And this has been reported as well by the IPCC and other reports that we have already heard. And of course, I would also like to emphasize on, because they said we are solving this problem, this planetary crisis on climate change, on biodiversity loss, and the pollution. And yes, in relation to this, while they always emphasize a science-based solution, of course, we also say that our science as indigenous peoples is based on our traditional knowledge systems and practices, which we have been doing for centuries, for generations, and we want to continue and use this, our contribution to whatever solutions that we have to undertake in relation or in response to this crisis that we are facing. I would also like to say that even with this crisis, we hope we are hopeful, as mentioned by Nnimmo, and continue to work together, collaborate, and build stronger partnerships in responding to all these crises, because we need all the support, our collective initiatives that would be responding to this crisis. We also would like to say that there are some concrete examples as well in relation to what they say as energy transition. It was reported by our colleagues from Russia that they have planned to, Russia had planned to expand small nuclear plants, what they call it. And this will be implemented in Myanmar, in Cambodia, parts of Malaysia. And this is what Nnimmo has been emphasizing on how this is being, the expansionism is being really used in relation to what they call just transition, and also to energy, to promoting transition in energy. And as we had heard yesterday as well in the climate march, of course, there is basic emphasis on transition from fossil fuels, but as I already mentioned, there is a shift now to really go into this transition process. They are they are extracting some of these elements, transition elements and minerals occurring in indigenous people's lands. And this is really a very urgent concern that we have, as I already emphasized and as already expressed by Nnimmo earlier. So anyhow, just to be, I already mentioned that in order to be able to contribute collectively in responding to all these crises that we are facing, indigenous people would like to really build stronger partnerships, as I already mentioned. At the same time, this includes both logistical and financial support, as also emphasized a while ago. And this is to further strengthen how we would be promoting indigenous people's knowledge systems and practices, strengthen whatever innovations and technologies that we want to work through hand in hand with all of these knowledge and practices, and work together in the various sectors of society to really resolve all of these problems of environmental crisis. Thank you very much. That's very brief.
Yes, thank you so much, Grace. At 5 minutes, 33 seconds. Perfect, no? But also, more importantly, for reminding us that in all of these conversations around just transition, justice is a very, very important element that should not be mixed out. Because I think many of our decision makers are just, focusing on the transition aspect, and they're all in a mad rush to extract again all of these so-called transition minerals that are mostly found in indigenous lands, indigenous territories, thereby creating more displacement. So that's one example of how, a supposed alternative, supposed climate action ends up causing more damage and displacement and rights violations to people and planet. Yeah? So we should not forget, the first thing in just transition is justice. Yeah. So having said that, we've been focusing a lot on the impact on people, but we're talking about the bigger picture, biodiversity. It's about plants, animals, all of our natural systems. So we'd now like to invite Jackson D, our friend from, I'm sorry if I pronounced it wrong, Beer Potent International. He's from Austria. Maybe he can introduce himself even better than I did. So Jackson, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Jackson Zhu. I am with the Potent International, also known as Four Paws International in English. We are an animal protection organization, and we work on these topics with our friends and partners here at the United Nations. I am the cluster lead for the Animal Issues Thematic Cluster, part of the NGO Major Group. I also sit on the UNECE and on SCAP. So we're here to represent multiple regions and discuss the animal welfare perspective. But before I get into that perspective, Triple Planetary Threat is a United Nations Environment Program language. The three things are up there, so it's climate, biodiversity loss, and pollution. We link it to a few things that we do. One is pandemic prevention. Pandemics happen because of food systems and troubled food systems, and people are trying to get food, and they have a right to food. The question is, when they don't have that, problems caused by potential spillover, then causes horrible things like the recent pandemic. The biodiversity loss from wildlife trade is an issue, but people do it with consumption. So because of massive consumption or feeding markets or having people exploitatively taking things from nature, and using it for other purposes, it becomes problematic. For climate, of course, very direct. Agriculture is over 30% contributed to greenhouse gas emissions. This is not really discussed very often, but it's a massive component. But that's just specifically the agriculture, the livestock component. When we start looking at the holistic aspects of it, it means the transport of animals grown in one place, slaughtered in another, and then moved around the world to be sold. That also has climate cost in the matter to feed people. Last but not least, in pollution, animal pollution, we know animal waste is a polluting factor. And industrial farming, that causes big pools of animal species that have to be held. When there's a flood or something bad happens, that spills over into soil and into waterways and out into the ocean. You damage soil and forest, you damage aquatic life, and you cause problems with algae blooms and coral reefs and all of the aspects of the over-saturation of nutrients or nitrogen pollution into those environments. The other component that we recently discovered is related to AMR, antimicrobial resistance. 80% of all antibiotics produced are used specifically on the production of livestock for food. Only 20% is used for people for normal medicine. That's why we have a resistance to lots of pharmaceuticals. With this, when animals consume antibiotics, it's actually mostly excreted out of them. It's another aspect of pollution. We now have a study that will be published in Nature in November, but it looks at community exposure to antimicrobial resistance when they live to large industrial complexes that they're trying to do. Children who've never had antibiotics are resistant. This causes problems for their health and to the health of the whole community. Now, it's in the environment that also affects all the animals and things in the environment. These are concerns that we have. We believe, have hope, that because animal welfare is a string that goes through all of these concerns, it may be an avenue to discuss where animal welfare has a direct link to human rights and human welfare, human well-being. These are all living things. We all want to live in harmony. We all want to be able to survive. With the six mass extinction happening, the triple planetary threat, we're all facing the same existential crisis. So our hope is to convey and link with friends and partners like the farmers major group, academia, industry, to come up with better solutions that are holistic, that look at not exploitation, but a holistic way of looking at the complex problems that are out there and discuss it in a way that allows us better solutions that's better for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jackson. And you beat the record at 5 minutes, 9 seconds. But also thank you so much for, making that important link about it's not really agriculture per se that's polluting and causing so much more farmers' fault that, we're having all of this climate change, global warming. But thank you for pointing out that it is actually industrial, corporate agriculture that's, causing all of these big problems. So I think we need to keep that in mind so that we have that critical lens when we try to read through what official negotiation documents would want us to believe in. Yeah. So I'm sure a lot of our friends are already having some questions and comments and would like to share their own stories. Hold off for 5 more minutes because we do have another speaker who would now be sharing, some of the things that they have been discussing in the region. So I'd like to call on Georgina Munoz from Latinidad who would be sharing what are the demands, what are the aspirations from the regional process of GCAP in Latin America. So Georgina, welcome. Bien, este tema sobre crisis planetaria realmente es un tema profundo que la humanidad y todos los pueblos tenemos que trabajar de forma conjunta junto a los gobiernos y toda la sociedad. So this planetary crisis is really a very deep problem that we need all to work together with governments, institutions to really be able to come to a solution. Desde Latinoamérica y el Caribe, en nuestra Asamblea Global, ha sido una prioridad este tema. So from Latin America and the Caribbean, this has really been a very crucial topic. Significa construir una gobernanza global alrededor de un proceso inclusivo que nos permita ser transparentes y que realmente debemos invertir en el desarrollo. So this implies carrying out a global governance that really allows us to invest in the development, transformar asuntos estructurales para la región Latinoamérica y el Caribe, África, Asia es fundamental. To transform structural elements for Latin America and globally speaking. No podemos continuar con condiciones de desigualdad, exclusiones, pobreza. We can't continue with conditions of inequality, exclusion, poverty, que son vinculantes a la crisis climática, that are very related to the climate crisis, y todas las múltiples crisis que conocemos, and all the multiple crises that we are aware of. Necesitamos generar un financiamiento concesional basado en la responsabilidad de los países enriquecidos. So we need to generate a consensual financing based on the historic responsibility of rich countries. Y también necesitamos impulsar de manera precisa el acuerdo de Escazú que aquí se ha planteado. And we also need to promptly push forward the Escazú agreement that has been mentioned previously. Que es un acuerdo mundial, regional, pero mundial a la vez, which is a regional agreement that is also global, único que incluye la defensa de los promotores ambientales. And it's unique because it really includes the defense of environmental defenders. Y debemos también continuar estableciendo bloques regionales entre los gobiernos que impulsen políticas públicas de una manera dirigida hacia justicia social, justicia climática y justicia financiera. We also need to establish regional blocks to implement political policies with a priority in social justice, climate justice, economic justice, fiscal justice, and others. Y también construir una región de paz es urgente, un ambiente también que nos permita eliminar la violencia contra las mujeres y la violencia contra la naturaleza. We also need to construct a region of peace, eradicating all forms of violence, including violence to women, youth, and sexual diversity. Otra de nuestras demandas es que realmente garantizar el financiamiento climático es fundamental, es un compromiso internacional de la responsabilidad histórica de los países del norte global. Another thing that we really need to guarantee is the financing of climate, which has to do with the compromises, the responsibilities, internationally speaking,
especially with those countries where this is more of a responsibility. Afirmamos nuestro compromiso desde la sociedad civil de continuar trabajando con organizaciones de base, con pueblos indígenas, con campesinos, con mujeres, con jóvenes, con adultos mayores, para realmente llevar adelante los procesos de transformación que se requieren en la implementación de la Agenda 2030. So we want to further state our compromise of working with all the different stakeholders to really push all of these forward, and she mentioned a lot of different stakeholders. Gracias. Hay otros elementos que podemos compartir más adelante. Thank you. There's other elements that we can share further along. Muchas gracias, Desina, for sharing with us some of the demands and aspirations, no, and positions coming from the region. I think these positions are shared not just by Latin America, but I think it speaks to, you know, majority of us in the global south of how we envision we can reclaim, you know, our right to imagine the future. And it's very, very good also that when you presented those demands, it also kind of breaks down those siloed thinking that the environmental crisis is just that, you know, something to do with the environment. But when you pointed out all of those interconnections around finance, the development model, I think, you know, we hit the nail on the head, as they say, you know, that unfortunately, I think most of our negotiators continue to fail to do so, or maybe they just choose to ignore it because it will come into conflict with their own interests, you know? All of those corporate capture and, you know, intricate web and etc. that Nnimmo already talked about earlier. So thank you so much for making those linkages very clear. And good news, we do have time. Yeah, we do have time to hear other people's voices. And so at this point, we'd like to invite anyone who would like to ask a question, for clarification, or share their own story of struggle and resistance in their community, because those stories are really, really important in order to affirm that what we are doing, what we are fighting for, is right and just. So, my sister, can you please introduce yourself? And yeah, actually recording as well. Yeah, so this is really, my name is Anne Aga. I work for an organization called Polyformist in Kenya. So this is really for Nnimmo, because you mentioned you are an ancestor. So really, just to ask, Africa has been exploited for the longest time. And actually where we are right now is the more lenient person exploring, exploiting. In the case of Niger, much as they have stepped away from France, they are now vulnerable to Russia. So really just to check with you, what measures can young people and even people generally have in place to secure themselves, even if the government is quite vulnerable? Because in the defense of the government and us, most people are not aware actually of how vulnerable they actually are. And the view is that when you're being exploited, it's like sort of, it looks like some type of favor, because they would say, oh, the community will be better. You know, we are lucky we have this mineral here, because when they exploit it, they'll bring infrastructure. So really just in terms of how do we safeguard ourselves from the vulnerabilities of having the resources that should actually make us richer, but instead make us very vulnerable. Okay, so we're collecting first, no? And then I will ask the panel to respond to or react to whatever they've heard. Anyone else? All right. Hold
on. Thank you for all of that. Now, I got to speak in French because I want to be understand what I'm saying.
Hold on. Is there any French speaker in the room who could help us with interpretation? Do, my sister.
You must try. Yes, I have also English. You can ask it out for translation. My English is not very fluent. So, Ok, je m'appelle Omar Sow, je suis du Sénégal, donc de l'Afrique. Et quand on parle de l'Afrique, c'est le continent, comme l'a dit notre frère, le plus affecté sur les questions de changement climatique.
Ich bin Omar Sow, ich komme aus dem Senegal. Oh, not that. I thought all of you know New German. Okay, normally you translate into your own language, so that's so I'm Omar Sow, I come from Senegal, and yeah, as I come from Africa, as the colleague said, Africa is the most affected by climate change.
Et quand on parle de la région d'Israël, je pense que c'est la région de la grande sécheresse, c'est la région de la grande famine, c'est la région des plus grandes perturbations sur les questions climatiques.
Especially as we talk about the Sahel zone, this area where there's a lot of drought, there are a lot of drought, there's a lot of hunger, and so the effects of climate change are very strong in the Sahel zone.
Et vous remarquez, il y a quelques moments, il y a une forte migration des communautés africaines vers l'Europe.
And that's one reason that there's a very strong migration from these countries to Europe.
Parce que les gens ne cultivent plus, il ne pleut plus, ils n'ont plus de terres fertiles, ils n'ont plus de possibilités en réalité pour vivre.
Because people cannot cultivate their land as before, it's not raining as before, so they have no income and leave.
Donc, leur avenir est hypothéqué et ils ne savent plus à quel fin se vouer.
Pardon, encore.
Donc, leur avenir est hypothéqué. Donc, leur avenir, ils le voient de manière incertaine.
But therefore, the future is very uncertain.
C'est pourquoi aujourd'hui, je pense qu'il est nécessaire en réalité d'intégrer toutes ces questions dans la dimension de l'Afrique et aujourd'hui le continent le plus affecté en réalité sur les questions de changement climatique. Là où en réalité les autres pays, les grands pollueurs, ne respectent pas en réalité les conditionnalités qu'ils avaient produites.
Yeah, and that's, as I said, Africa is the most affected by climate change, and the big polluter countries, they don't respect this situation and the impact.
Et quand les Africains migrent vers les autres pays, on les repousse, on les considère en réalité comme des gens en réalité qui n'ont rien à voir ou bien qui n'ont pas le droit en réalité de se déplacer ou bien d'aller même changer de vie.
And if the people leave Africa, the countries don't respect their rights. They are treated in a very bad sense, as if they don't have any rights.
Comment voulez-vous que les grandes industries, les grands pays qui ont de l'argent, qui sont riches, ne respectent pas le droit en tant que grands pollueurs et que vous considérez les citoyens qui sont des démunis, qui sont pauvres, et qu'on les exige de respecter leurs droits? C'est paradoxal.
So it's actually the paradox is that these big polluters, which cause the problem, they don't do anything financially, and then they respect even not the rights of those people who are most affected, most poor.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much for your contribution. We'll take one more reaction from the floor, and then let's try to hear back from the panelists. And then if we have time, then we do a second round. Do I see a hand in the corner? Well, in front. Bingo. Come on down. And Francis, por favor.
D'accord. Merci. Et merci à tous les panélistes. Merci également à mon collègue Oumar pour son intervention. Et moi, je suis Esso du Togo, je travaille pour l'ONG Jeunes Verts. Et je suis le représentant de BGF également au Togo. Effectivement, comme les collègues du Sénégal a dit, l'Afrique ne met que 4%, seulement que 4% des émissions sur le monde entier.
So thank you to all the panelists for this good input. My name is Esso. I come from Togo, from an organization called Young Green. And yeah, indeed, Africa is only contributing 4% of the emissions globally.
Donc, sur les 4%, il y a le Nigeria, l'Afrique du Sud qui ont plus de 90%.
And even among from this 4%, there are some countries like Nigeria and South of those 4%.
Donc, ce qui veut dire qu'un pays comme le Sénégal ou encore le Togo a une contribution de 0,0001%.
So countries like Togo or Senegal contribute only 0,001%.
Donc, vous trouvez que c'est vraiment anormal qu'on puisse demander à ces pays de pouvoir respecter tout ce qui est mis en œuvre pour lutter contre les changements climatiques en ne les apportant pas de financement.
So it's really not normal that the global community is asking those countries now to cut the emissions and to do the mitigation, adaptation, and so on, and without having any financial support.
Donc, ici, en fait, notre rôle devrait être, c'est la question que je pose aux panélistes, à tout le monde. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez qu'on puisse faire pour, au même moment, permettre à ces pays de se développer de façon durable, sans trop nuire à leur environnement?
So my question to the panelists is how we can actually work with these countries to have a sustainable development without really doing too much damage to the environment.
All right. Thanks so much for all of those inputs. And by the way, start plug the next session after this would be around climate finance. So stick around. So our panelists, what are your thoughts from all that you've heard so far? All right. Make it short, please. Okay, so shortly, we talk a lot about systemic needs for change. We talk a lot about policy. We talk a lot about, issues that need to change that are bigger than ourselves. But, I once I've analyzed so many things, what's in our power is really acting local, but acting from ourselves. And there's a lot of demands that we're making, and they're definitely real, but we need to start with ourselves. And I think we need to have a bit more of example. And I myself, I'm not an example, but I want to be. So I want to ask both the panelists and everybody here, what are you doing, personally speaking, from the different things you can do as a person to not contribute more to, all these climate problems? So I try to recycle at home, and I want to reduce my plastic consumption, but I want to know, what are we doing here? And what can we do more? Because there's plastic there, we're still having cups. Why isn't anybody bringing, why are we bringing our own cups? So we need to do the example. That's a challenging question. I try to hold my governments and rich countries accountable for the bigger climate mess that they're doing. Because in the Global South, as what we heard from our friend from Togo, Global South emits 0.00001%, and yet we're being asked to reduce, reuse, and recycle. But no matter how much we do those things, if the big polluters out there continue to extract, continue to pollute our waters and destroy our land, I don't think any amount of reducing, recycling, and reusing would make a difference to solve the climate crisis. But that's me. So let's hear from our panelists, and then maybe we can ask each one a minute to respond to things that we've heard so far. Maybe we start here with Jackson.
All right. For a minute. Gosh, there was a lot of information. Yes, we act locally. We act personally on our own efforts to do the best we can in our lives for the planet. One. Two, the two great gentlemen who asked those questions, and also our panel, I'd love to get their take on this, but we are activists, and many times we feel that it is our job to go out and fight in campaigns. I am on the other side, and I talk about and following systems and protocols and processes because there needs to be the tracking and the clarity of what we do and why. The transparency is very important so that we can identify what risks are. But exploitation, big thing there for me is the climate issues. It's because it has zero people. Extract it is free. It is some kind of a place in the future.
I want to refer in a very general way, and it's the response. Una responsabilidad de las instituciones, de los gobiernos, de la sociedad civil organizada. It's a responsibility of institutions, governments, civil society, organized. No podemos continuar con un modelo extractivista. We can't continue with an extractivism model. Lo hemos visto hoy en las exposiciones. Y nosotros lo vivimos desde los territorios. And we've seen that today in what has been presented, and we live it from our esto incrementa las crisis que se están dando a nivel mundial. And this includes on a global level. Podemos ver cuáles son las causas de esas crisis. We can see what are the causes of those crises. Mientras no cambien las cumplir con la agenda, those causes and those structural issues are entailed, it can be very difficult to really achieve that agenda. Por eso es urgente el compromiso social, el poder que tienen las organizaciones de sociedad civil. And that is why it's very urgent the action of society and the power that civil society has in this. Ya lo decía el secretario general de Naciones Unidas, que nosotros tenemos esa responsabilidad de incidir en ese proceso de cambio. the Secretary General was already saying that we have that responsibility of really acting in a civil society in that change. Y por eso hacía también el llamado a quienes tienen más, paguen más, que paguen sus impuestos, las grandes empresas. And that is why he was calling to those who have more to pay more, for them to pay their taxes. Que evitemos el endeudamiento de los países, porque nos generan una deuda que el sur no puede asumir, y que es responsabilidad de todos. And to avoid the debt that is happening in the global south, because that is a debt that countries here cannot really take on. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for the comment. There were mostly comments, not questions, but there was one question from Kenya. And I think that's also the other question for many young people. Young people really have a reason anxious about what is going on around them, because, you know, when we talk about the future, when countries talk about net zero by 2050, 2060, most of the people make those announcements. All best intentions may not be around by 2060. But the young people would have to bear the consequences of those kinds of decisions. So my advice to young people is, while the political leaders are busy building walls, you should be busy building solidarity. This is where you're going to learn. Link hands built from other countries, other nations, other territories, and learn wisdom, share and learn wisdom. There's always a promise that you can't develop, you can't grow, you can't be wealthy except you extract. It's a lie that has been sold right from six, and it's still being sold today. And it always proves itself to be false. If anybody tells you, for example, in Kenya, there are 30 oil lakes in Turkana region in Kenya or wherever, you have to ask, where did oil take the people of the Nile Delta to? Try to, if you can visit and see for yourself. The evidence of your eyes will prove to you whether this activity is beneficial or not. And as long as it's built in the colonial extractivist model, it's never for the region where the resource is taken. It's always for the capital. It's from periphery to the capital. Exploit, sacrifice, destroy, weaken, so that it can continue dominating. And you have to bring a new imaginary to overcome that block, that kind of situation.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the feedback and some of your comments and also thoughts. Yeah, of course, for indigenous peoples, we are basically community-based, land-based, and we are in the diverse ecosystem from forest to marine to the tundras or whatever. And based on this, we continue to do our own knowledge systems and practices, but at the same time, we also want to start in the national and as well as what David had emphasized on giving priority to justice and also the respect of human rights, and not continuing the violation of human rights and displacing local populations because of all the solutions. So I think that's what I can add on. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
And thank you. And well, just to wrap up the session and to answer a bit of what we're doing, this is more of a call to action at a regional and local level in Latin America. We are working with youth. We know that we need this is urgent, but we are also looking forward to the future, and we are trying to involve youth with our processes and some local and regional conferences of youth where we create the demands and the spaces to involve with official mechanisms at the UN. So we're making our voices heard. We're learning how to do so. We're learning about lobbying at a local level as well. And those are little actions that are transforming our country right now, and in Mexico at least. but the long-term goal is for the next generation of policymakers to be aware of everything that is going on and to come in with a new mindset. So thanks a lot. Thank you for staying with us. And then we are also creating our own demands and sharing our proposals. I think Carmen will lead this session, this part of the session. Okay. So thank you. All right. So a round of applause to all our amazing speakers. Thank you. Our hearts and our minds in this very day. So now, as Daniela mentioned, this part of our session would now focus on what this collective would try to bring forward to the world leaders as part of the People's Global Assembly process. So Carmen will lead us into, I think, basically affirming what we already know and what we already are working on. Yeah? So I'll hand it over to you, Carmen, while I grab myself a cup of coffee. Okay. Thank you. Well, actually, Rosie from the Millennial Movement had to be here and had to lead this session. But basically, what we want is kind of like some solutions in order to tackle this crisis, this planetary crisis. So this is the part where we want to hear like your proposals or what are the issues that we think have to be more in depth. And we're waiting for papers and post-its so everybody can write. But meanwhile, I don't know if anybody wants to kind of like start the conversations to think what are some solutions to this planetary crisis. And maybe we can write them down. Great. Hello, I am from Colombia. I'm part of the Millennial Movement, but I actually moved to the United States, one of the biggest emitters, you know, one of the countries that has more responsibility in the climate crisis, the triple crisis. And one of the things that I'm very concerned about living here and knowing more about what's happening and why things are not how I expected it, population here is not aware. There's a lack of awareness, and the people who live here don't even know the big impact the way their lives are lived causes in other places in the world. And there's a lot of inequality, a lot of issues here as well. But who from this room is from the United States? Okay, good. We need more people. But just, you know, we need more awareness for the people and the people living in the countries that have the biggest responsibility. Okay, I just typed awareness.
Thank you. Yorgos Kostakos from the Foundation for Global Governance Sustainability. We have a proposal that I hope can meet also with approval for a Global Resilience Council to get away from focusing on security and the Security Council and all those problems and really focus on dealing with climate change, pandemic, inequality, the non-military threats to human security in a more systematic way. It could be like an executive body of the General Assembly, can be created easily, and should start thinking of bringing the whole UN system and the whole, world together around these issues. Because just to expect the UNFCCC to deal with climate through yearly negotiations and we see who is the president of the COP and all that is just a bazaar every year. So we need to focus on operationalizing decisions that are made, and we need a body for that, and it's not there. And that body should block in the governmental and bring together civil society and other constituencies in a systematic way. We have detailed the proposal if you are interested. Yeah, you can.
Thank you. So basically, just to make sure, if the proposal is to have a global resilience council. That's like that. Just in case, now we have a poster, we have markers, we have pens. I'm going to do. So anybody who wants to give first and then. So for the
Yeah, I come here because I don't want people to turn their backs to see me. This is a people's assembly. I want to tell the line of the first person who has just spoken now. This is a people's assembly. So we need to focus on what we, the people, are determined to do in this concrete situation. We know what is going on. Some of you might have seen the video. Bill Gates was launching his humanitarian fund, and Radio France went to him to congratulate him for the humanitarian launching, and they asked him, "You are launching 10 million. Do you know how the children who are mining the coltan in the DRC, those children, do you know how they are living? Do you know how the environment is being destroyed? Those who were launching the humanitarian fund carried the debt away." In other words, we need to tell the world leaders that we know that the private sector has captured government. They are meeting without us. The private sector is there. What are we doing here? And we are the ones suffering all these consequences. So we need to be clear about this, that if they want to leave the world to themselves and to do business, fine, let it be so. But they cannot continue exploiting nature, exploiting human beings. We cannot go on. And in other words, what you're having a shrinking space for the civil society means what? They are no longer giving money to civil society to make the noise. So we are being deprived of the resources to contradict anything, to challenge anything. They are looking between them. And as he said, we keep on missing here, fiesta talking, some of us with the little fund they give us. Meanwhile, they go on doing this business. We cannot go on like this. So I insist, people's assembly, what do we want to do? What the commitment we are taking from here? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is totally true, and I totally agree. And yes, we want this proposal as ambitious as they can be in order to start like helping our go ahead.
Thank you. Mandeep Tiwana from Syracuse. Fully agreeing with all the comments that have already been shared. The big challenge with the climate issue is that it's being reduced to a technocratic conversation, whereas the climate issue is actually a human rights issue. And it is up to us as civil society to make those linkages and to ensure that the UN makes those linkages. Unfortunately, what's happening is climate conferences are being held in countries which have no civic space. This happened in Egypt. This is going to happen in the United Arab Emirates, where people cannot protest peacefully, where people cannot come together, where there are civil and political human rights prisons. And we need to make sure that these conversations are not value-free conversations, and the human rights argument is always included whenever we speak about climate justice. Thank you.
So we have posted, you can write it down. We can also give you a mail that you can send your proposal, whoever wants. We want to hear from all of you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Joe Leinen from the European Foundation on Progressive Studies. Yes, I think sustainable development needs the adequate techniques to become sustainable or stay sustainable. And we see that there's a lot of discrimination in the vertical area. We propose a UN convention or even a global development to have a discriminatory-free access to adequate technology, and even develop technologies that are not the northern ones, that are adequate to the people and the countries around the world. So that's a key proposal, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. That is true. We need to also address the digital divide that we're facing between South and North. So it's one important issue. I don't know who else wants to give their proposals or put their ideas or share their stories. Yeah, I think really, as much as we are talking about the injustices that are ongoing now, it's very important to revisit the refugees that countries left in Africa during conflict before. So I think even as we move forward, it's very important for there to be restoration based on past injustices. For example, right now in Kenya, we have military training by the US and the British government. So I think it's very important to start by, if there's any training that should happen, it should happen in the respective countries. So if anybody needs to learn, they should learn in the respective countries. If they need to train the Kenyan army, then they do it, they ship them to the US and train them right here, so that there's some type of accountability. I believe the lack of accountability is based on it's not their land, so they care less about it. Great. So we kind of like, we talk about the planetary crisis. We would like to kind of like start making clusters, one for climate change, one for nature loss, one for chemicals, and so on. So you can, we have like already the posters here. So whoever has posts can leave them there. I'm going to give here, and then I'm going to pass to you, girls. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. I think it's very important to find actions that are real and measurable. So, for example, nowadays, technology, artificial intelligence, blockchain, Internet of Things, this is a new discussion. The whole world is talking about it. It is growing faster and faster, every time more important, and it's smarter every time. So, in my opinion, it's very crucial to think how we can find through these technologies, through this intelligence, solutions, like immediate solutions that can make real transformation in the different systems, in the different stages that we need to modify. So I would invite only about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, 2 more interventions on this side. And please put it in the post-it, and we'll collect them so we can start putting those. Okay, first, can you, and then I am sitting from chat. One of these things that's been discussed the future on the agenda of the Summit of the Future. And what we're hearing is that the environment will not be one of the 5 pillars to be discussed in terms of global governance reform. So I'm hoping that we can raise some concerns about the demolition of the environment in that summit. Thank you. We're going to write that down. There you go. And do that from the past. And, climate crisis is a serious still, please, those who have posted, that way we can systemize all this conversation. Thank you. Okay. Oh, okay. For the Zoom, this session has concluded. We're going to have a few minutes to have coffee and to prepare for the next session. Thank you. To everybody in the Zoom session, we have concluded